Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps lots. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. Alright folks, here we are after market close on Thursday, May 5th. We're going to take a look at SPY, QQQ, IWM, and UVXY to get a sense of the macro forces in the market. So we'll kick things off here on SPY and we'll kind of get a check-in on the levels. One new thing that I do want to mention before we get started, and this is the reason that I zoomed out so far here on the daily. Look at this volume. This was the sell-off February, March of 2020. I'm sure you remember that well. Look at the volume spike, and then look where the volume came down. This was basically like where my cursor is here is basically the tops of most of the volume candles. And look what's happening during this recent pullback. You see a pretty solid spike here, right on that little pullback. And then you see a pretty solid spike here as things kind of got pretty choppy. And then you see a big spike and a hold, and it's still kind of holding, right? So holding well above where these like recovery levels, the volume recovery levels throughout this entire 2020 like super recovery that we had that stretched, into like the first half or more of 2021. And so, that's something to I think really keep an eye on here, as this sell volume is what most of it is, obviously, right? This was up at 478 and some change, and we're down at 413, and you see this huge spike in volume, right, as that like big sell-off occurred, and that volume is sustaining. And so I would keep a strong eye on the volume, especially if the Fed is really going to just sort of tighten, go through their quantitative tightening, and that's gonna, I imagine, sustain that selling pressure. It's something to at least keep an eye on. I don't know. It's speculative at this point, but it's something I noticed, and I thought just beyond the levels, that's probably really worth paying attention to as we are dropping down on increased volume, and that we really had this like mega recovery on relatively low volume, comparatively speaking. So in any case, levels. So what I would look for on SPY, we've seen this motion relatively recently. Now we had this big push up here, like I said. We dropped down into these purple zones are bounce zones, and then these are like key levels. But these to me are the strongest zones. These levels to me are more sort of like psychological, around 415, 400, 440, 445. But these are the strong bounce zones, or these sort of like magnetic zones where the price keeps seeming to want to return through, pass through, flip from support to resistance and support to resistance, and so on and so forth. Eventually that ceases, right? And then this red zone is the constant rejection zone, right? Where it tries to hold above, gets rejected, confirms it as resistance, comes down to the support zones, bounces, confirms that red zone as resistance, then sells off again. So what I mean by we've seen this relatively recently, we put in this top, we came down to these bounce zones, came up, rejected off the red, with obviously a lower high than this big push up here, came down deeper to the bounce zones, and actually all the way to this 414-ish level, came, shot right back up to the red zone, couldn't hold it on a slightly higher high, and then came back down now with another lower low, stretching down to about 405 or 404, and really starting to sort of put in to proximity that 400 level. And now we're coming up, and are we just going to shake off of the purple bounce zone, either this one or the one slightly higher that stretches into the 430s? I don't know, but if we start making that significantly lower high, I would be really cautious for the bulls. I mean, for the bears, you might have a field day. And if this does shoot up to the red zone and it shakes off again and pulls back, then do we put in yet another lower low? Even if we put in a slightly higher high here, like what if we come up to 465 465, and then we come back down to 400. I mean, the insane choppiness of that is wild, but to my mind, one of these two things has to give. Either we need to stop making higher highs and start making, or I guess keep making lower lows, or stop making lower lows and start making the higher highs. Now, I say that, but the obvious other alternative is we could chop, right? We could continue to chop from, say, 400 to 450, 455 for who knows how long. I mean, that's, more or less what we've been doing. I haven't stretched down to 400 yet, but there's nothing really preventing that from being the case either. I mean, we'll look at IWM in a couple minutes and notice that spent basically a year, all of 2021, in a range like that. So that could certainly happen. I would, I don't know. I was going to say I would tend to think that's not the case because of how crazy choppy it's been between those levels, but that could exactly be why it stays in that level, to be honest, is because it's getting these wild swings from bears to bulls to bears to bulls, but it doesn't really move anywhere. But it still is sort of playing out the volatility in the market within that, say, $55 range, situated just above 400. So I don't know. Those are sort of the things that I'm looking at. But like I said, also want to keep a strong eye on the volume at this point. QQQ looks relatively similar. SPY and QQQ are looking the closest they have been all along since we've been tracking. Big difference is QQQ has been consistently dipping lower relative to the levels that we put in than SPY has been. So we see this losing 320, obviously, so it's probably worth putting in some potential support levels here. If we scroll back, last time it was around the 320s, there's probably a level here around 304. And then in the interim, I mean, not a lot, maybe right around here, just about 313, like where it is at the moment. But that 304 or 313 selection will be quite interesting to see. And obviously you see the run up in volume here, like we talked about. You see some bigger spikes along the way, I think. I'm kind of just going off the naked eye here, but maybe some larger volatility in QQQ than in SPY during this run up. But yeah, I mean, this one, like I said, looks similar, right? Slightly higher high on this one, dipped down to make a lower low, but it has lost more levels that we had put in on this chart than SPY. So those are the levels that I look for. This is IWM. This was talking about. This was January 11th of 2021, and it left this, well, we should say here, on January 20th of 2022. So it had this brief, push out of the range, and it just fell right back in, right? That was a pretty short-lived blip. It was a few days, but it really pushed up for just a few days and then just chugged itself back down. So in any case, volume here again, you see, huge concentration of volume push here that then sort of subsided while it climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed, and then obviously flatlined out mostly during the range. That's why I don't know how much to correlate this range to the potential for a SPY range that we talked about, because and how that could tie into the volume, because you see as it went through this range here, toward the end of it being in that range, that's when the volume really started to pick up, and that's when it sold off down to the levels where it is now. So so I don't know if this sort of stagnation in volume is what we would look for in SPY, potentially staying in a range versus, dipping below 300 or climbing back to new highs. But this is how IWM did it. We'll say that. And so what's left with SPY and how that is or is not going to correlate, sort of to be seen. So we're sitting here about 185. I mean, to me, there's not a lot holding this here. Historical price wise, and that's a poorly framed sentence, but it's late for me, and I've been up for a long time today. But in any case, if unless it can reclaim really this 190 level, I would have a hard time seeing it not try to go down to 170 3 or so, and maybe it'll chop around there for a while. I don't know. It loves to chop around and then break, right? I mean, obviously a long time here, but then even after it did that, it chopped around, basically bear flagged, and then broke. So will we see another something like that where it tries to climb back to like mid 190s or something and then breaks down and maybe then, makes a go at 173? I don't know. But something to look for, those are the levels that I'm most interested in. Obviously, UVXY looks quite different. But you do see just these wild days, right? And I know this is like a super messy chart. A bunch of these orangish ones, I didn't come in and clean this up, obviously. Those are intraday levels that I had put in previously, and same thing with this purple one here. So these blue ones are, to me, are really the critical ones. I had said in my last video when I talked about UVXY, anything over 17, like confirming and sustaining over 17 is really problematic for the bulls, really great for the bears. And we're seeing it really battle, coming right off of that 14 level yesterday and then pushing up over that 17. So how it ends tomorrow, like can it sustain over 17 tomorrow or even higher, who knows? And then what does it do in the early parts of next week? Is it sustaining over 17? Is it dropping back down and retesting 16 and 15 and 14? That will obviously tell the other half of the story. Always good to confirm sort of motion, like upward motion on SPY with downward motion on UVXY and vice versa, and see where each is hitting key levels and reacting off of them, because it has been playing out quite solidly intraday, right? You see here UVXY coming in this morning just above this 1407 level, and then coming up not really taking even a breath at 1487, just plowing up through. But then here's where it did the break and the confirm, right? Break, confirm, 1596 to the penny. Actually, the low of that candle is 1596. Comes up, the body of this candle comes right off of 1712, and then it double rejects, comes down, doesn't need to confirm that 1596 level, which is when you know, okay, there's probably some more bullish strength here, right? Whenever it comes and confirms and then rejects off the next level, but then when it comes down, it makes it a third or fourth attempt at that level without having to come down and test the bottom of that range again. That's sort of a continuation pattern. So in any case, it's just, this came within 19 cents. On such a wild day. Oh wait, these are my old eyes not working well. 5 cents. This came within 5 cents of what we had on the chart. So these levels to me holding up quite well. Obviously created them on the daily, but they're playing out intraday, which is how the daily is made. So in any case, those are the levels that I would mostly be paying attention to. Good luck out there. It's a wild time, and I think with the Fed's actions and the quantitative tightening, it might just get crazier out there. So stay on your toes and make smart moves. No shame in going cash if that seems like the smartest move to you. Don't feel like it has that your play has to be being in the market. Being in cash is a position as well. So, keep that in mind, but make whatever decision is best for you based on the current situation and your goals. All right, folks, I hope that you finish the week strong tomorrow. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.